And this morning, President Trump is expected to announce a new public safety initiative in Washington, D.C. At 10 a.m., the president is going to hold what's being advertised as a news conference at the White House, during which he's expected to detail what is likely to be a large-scale increase in law enforcement presence in our nation's capital. Officials tell NBC News President Trump is considering deploying up to 1,000 National Guard troops, but they say the decision is not final and no formal orders have been signed yet. The troops would likely be used to support law enforcement with tasks like protecting federal property. They are not expected to directly engage in policing the public. A spokesperson for the mayor of D.C. says the White House has not briefed them on any plans to deploy the National Guard. In a series of social media posts yesterday, President Trump decried safety in Washington, saying he would move homeless people, quote, far from the Capitol and put criminals in jail. The president first threatened a federal takeover of the city last week after a prominent DOJ employee was assaulted in an attempted carjacking. Two 15-year-olds were charged for that crime. There's no question, Joe, that there's a problem not just in Washington, but a lot of cities are grappling with homelessness and also having access to services for teens who need things to do.
Yeah, I mean, quality of life issues obviously have been terrible in a lot of American cities since COVID. John Lemire, though, Washington has had problems for years, for decades. And I must say, even going back to when I worked there 30 years ago in Congress, I always wondered why Congress didn't take more of an interest in making Washington, D.C. safer. At the time, Marion Barry would say, the mayor would say, well, crime's not really that bad in Washington, D.C. if you don't count the murders, which sort of reminds me of the New York Times article yesterday that was talking about how crime has dropped in D.C. substantially over the last 2 years. But then, of course, at the very end noted that Washington, D.C. ranked number 3 in gun homicides in the United States. Let me say that again. While we show 26% a decrease in crime, here we are, though, Washington, D.C. is still ranked 3rd in homicides by guns. Nobody wants to see, I certainly don't want to see the president federalize troop movements in Washington, D.C., but I have always wondered why the national government didn't take a more active interest in safety and security and quality of life issues in the nation's capital. Because this city doesn't just belong to the city council of Washington, D.C. It belongs to the nation.
No, that it certainly does. And the statistics tell us sort of two stories at once. You're right to highlight the rise in gun homicides. There was also a wave a couple of years ago, a high-profile wave of a lot of carjackings in Washington, but the overall crime has gone down, as we just noted there. Washington, a city that I'm in a lot, certainly post-pandemic, like a lot of big cities, really there did feel like a sense of decline and a sense of crime. Not only crime was up, a sense of sort of menace was up, but a lot of that has improved in the last year or so. It's unclear how much the president himself sees of Washington. He doesn't travel out very much beyond driving through a portion of it on his way to his golf course in Virginia. But you're right. This has been an issue for a while. But, Mara, this is a significant ratcheting up, if you will, of not just the rhetoric from the White House, but potentially action in terms of taking steps here. You know, the presence of the National Guard, which is not confirmed. Were the National Guard deployed here? We certainly know what happened when they went out to Los Angeles earlier this year. That raised a lot of emotions for people. There's reports of the FBI agents. A lot of them have fanned out in the streets now to combat crime. So certainly trying to bring crime down, a noble effort. But what do you make of the way this is being done?
Yeah, I just don't know that it's a noble effort in this instance, because I don't believe that Donald Trump can be trusted to do this. is disturbing to think about all of these federal agencies and law enforcement being deployed in this way against American citizens. They shouldn't be policing. That's not their job. And of course, crime is a major issue, and quality of life, as Joe said, is an important issue. I think the best thing, and of course this isn't going to happen right now, but I personally believe that Washington, D.C. should be its own state and should have local governance that is accountable to the people who live there and pay taxes there. Now, barring that, I also have to wonder, crime is a serious issue. Again, no matter who you are, you want to know that your community is safe. But how much of this is about grandstanding, is about Donald Trump just bashing cities because this is another point of distraction for him with the Epstein files, with anger that he has domestically over this meeting coming up with Vladimir Putin. There's a lot of things that he would like to distract us from. And so bashing cities has been a go-to thing for him to do. Also, the discussion of homelessness. Homelessness is a serious issue. It's a quality of life issue, first for the people who are unhoused, and secondly for communities who are affected by it. But nothing that we've heard from this White House so far suggests that he actually cares about these people or improving the situation. The fact that the mayor and the city council haven't been brought in should be the first red flag.
All right, so